Good afternoon, and welcome to this week's Sonar Market Insights webinar. We've got Zach Strickland, our resident Sonar market expert, and Brad Ganane here moderating the conversation. We have a ton of awesome stuff to show you. Our newest Sonar release 3.2 came across over this weekend. A lot of new UI functionality that we want to show you guys, and we're very excited to show you. So I think Zach is going to kick things off here today with our mapping feature. And what do we have going on here, Zach?
All right, guys. So thanks for joining us this week. We got a big upgrade to our UI, our user interface, as we like to call it. We got a lot of additions to the map and how we've organized some of the information in here. So for those of you that have been tuning in and keeping up with us, you're going to see a lot of kind of changes to the front screen as you get into the map this week. Hopefully you got the editorial note and the email that kind of lays some of this out for you. For those of you that aren't as familiar with Sonar, it won't matter. So we'll start off with the map, which got probably the single biggest change in everything this week, and we've reorganized some things. These buttons over here used to be scattered across the page. This button right up here is what we used to have over here. It covers the date, and so you can click on this and change the date for whatever time that you want it. And then you have these buttons over here. Now this button got expanded. This used to literally be a little toggle down at the bottom of the map where you would turn the freight information on and off. Well, now we've kind of changed things up a little bit. Now we have where you can change by market granularity, and also you have to turn this on if you want to get the data to kind of populate in the background. And from that point on, you can click which data that you want inside the UI. But I'll start from the beginning. So literally you log in and you see a screen like this. Now, say I want to look at, my weekly O-Try change, sure, for instance. So I would go up here to this button here. One, I'd make sure that I have today's date clicked appropriately. I would click on this box, go here and pick today's date, and then simply go down here to activate the freight data button that kind of controls all the background data. First, I want the freight data on, and then kind of the default setting is the thing that most users are used to, the US markets. These are the KMAs and all of the in the United States that you can turn on and off. This kind of activates the background layer. And now this chloropleth setting, you don't have to know what a chloropleth is. Just know that if you want to activate the data that you're used to seeing, you click that on button there, and then you go down here to click, to scroll through and pick whichever of the data that you are wanting to see. So we're going to pick the Outbound Tender Rejection Index weekly change just to see which markets in the country are having the most heated or cooling activity. You can see Arkansas still showing up pretty large. So you'll see that I just clicked on the market there, and that activates a totally different box of information for you to go through and look at. And you'll see that it has freight data and also location forecast. The freight data will give you some visibility into some of the data. Some of the data is not populated yet, but it will be in the future. The location forecast is really why this is there right now. You'll notice in the background of the map that we have these new roads, or these kind of multicolored lines.
So what are those multicolored lines, Zach? What are we looking at?
So this is part of the new feature that we've added called road conditions. And we can dig into that here in a minute, but what you're looking at on this box is essentially the temperature of the road surface. Now you might be wondering why that's so important.
Why is that so important?
Because we still have the weather layer that I'll get to here in a minute, that we have not changed that much. But road conditions are kind of the most important thing when you're dealing with trucking, because it can be snowing, but when it hits the ground, it just melts if the road temperature is too high, which you see right here that I've clicked on the Arkansas market where things are relatively warm. You'll notice, I'm going to click back off this box for just a second to clear this up. Back over here in the Chicago area, you'll see these red lines, and you'll see down here is the legend I'm going to click this back off so you can see clearly what everything means. The road conditions out here in Kansas and Texas and whatnot, they are mostly dry. The blue indicates wet, which we have a lot of here in the southeast, as it's been raining significantly. Then you can follow along right here. Red means snow, where you can click on up here. That'll pull back up your box, and you can kind of see. And what happens is, when I click on this map now, it actually goes to the exact point that you click on in the map, and it finds the nearest latitude, longitude point, and eventually we will have kind of the nearest location or the nearest city, so nobody has to go out and pull up their, geofencing coordination map and try to triangulate where this is. But this is going to give you kind of the road conditions, if you will, and weather conditions in that area. So without even clicking on that, though, you can clearly see that the Midwest has got some snowy roads. Washington, D.C. is starting to get a little slushy.
And what is that in the top right corner? I'm seeing 4 a.m. Eastern in that play button and 48 hours road conditions. What is that?
Is a great question, Brad. So in the past, when we had the weather layer on here, this is what would kind of play, a previous few hours, and then it would go into the future with kind of forecasted precipitation. Well, with the road conditions clicked on, we can now predict up to 48 hours into the future what the road conditions will be like in the next 48 hours. So the animation kind of clearly goes through a 3-hour interval and starts progressing as you see the snow-covered roads start moving up into Maine and the Northeast over the next little bit, and then it resets back over to the beginning. And you can hit pause at any given time just to kind of see. So this is going to have some pretty good use case here due to the fact that you're going to have a lot of operational decision makers that can now go out there and see, well, I can see that the roads are actually going to clear out here in Chicago after being snow-covered. And,
And you can actually, what happens if you zoom? I know you can get a little bit more in detail as you zoom into some of these regions as far as the actual highways, crossing streets, roads. As you zoom and refresh, a lot more highways will populate as you get closer.
Yes, they will. But for the purpose of this, I just want to kind of illustrate that's what they're doing. But yeah, you can get a lot more granular, and when you click on some of these conditions, you can obviously get closer in and see exactly what kind of road conditions you're dealing with, road temperatures, especially around this area up here. And just to let everybody know, this does go out 48 hours, so you can scroll through to get a specific detailed location forecast, if you will. And you'll see that the road temperature actually has a lot higher volatility. There's a lot more variability in road temperatures, even up here in the Milwaukee market where it's been snowing a lot. And that's because the fact that this is measuring true road surface temperature. As the sun comes out, the road absorbs a lot more heat than the standard grass-covered ground will. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, when we're going over the road.
Right.
So, again, on that. Now, for those of you that are wondering what might have happened to my precipitation layer, that's still there. But note that you cannot have the precipitation layer on at the same time as the road conditions. So once you click this on, the road conditions go off, and that's simply just to manage the amount of information that's coming at you. It cleans up the map a lot more, so you can clearly see where all the activity is. And you still have your animation feature for the precipitation layer. It'll still forecast it out for you as it see it's going to continue to rain over Tennessee forever and never stop. And then all that precipitation will go into the Northeast and whatnot.
Awesome. So we've got our roadmap layer, precipitation. We can, of course, keep our freight data through the heat map as we're overlaying these different road conditions and weather events. What else do we have? I think we may have one more thing here on the map that's pretty awesome update.
So the one thing that we do have, in addition to all the road conditions and stuff, are the road cameras. So let me pull that off. In addition to the road conditions and the and all the different toggles over here, we now have road cameras, so you can actually get in here and see specifically what conditions are in different roads across the country. What's wrong?
No, you're fine.
So some of these these are all linked to DOT cameras across the country. So some of these, as they kind of refresh, they have different refresh rates. We're going out there every 10 to 15 minutes and hitting these cameras to see if we get a refresh on it. Obviously, this is government information, so their websites don't all act the same way, and they don't always, we're at the mercy of whether or not their cameras are functional or not, they're on or off. But for the most part, these are pretty reliable cameras. You go out to any of their websites, we've kind of aggregated all of those cameras and all their data and kind of put it into SONAR. We have several cameras. You see the visibility goes all the way up into Canada. So not only can you get the road condition situation, but you can also get kind of a quick eagle eye view of everything. You can see over here close to Chicago, it's very wet, but the roads are clear as all that snow has kind of cleared out of the area for the moment, but it's still melting. So yes.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much covers the map update, I believe. So new placement on the dates on the actual freight data and the weather and road conditions overlay, and of course the road cameras.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing that I forgot to cover real fast, and that's the fact that we do have this over here, these 3 dots. Once you have the location forecast, you can actually go over here and click ice on road, snow on road, get an hourly rainfall rate, and also hourly snow, ice, wind speed for anybody that's hauling, empty trailers across the middle of the country. You can kind of check to see, well, what's the wind speed going over Nebraska right now, where you do have a lot of risk for trailers to get blown over in the wind.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And as you kind of transition into our next new feature that we want to talk about here, just a quick reminder, we're going to try to get through everything here by roughly 2:25 and Eastern time, and then we'll try to address some questions there at the end of the webinar. So we've got a few coming in right now. Those of you who may have questions as well as we go through, please don't hesitate to ask them, but we'll address them towards the end of the webinar.
Yeah, so not only did we upgrade and kind of reorganize the map, we did change some navigation features. For those of you that have been in the product for a while or have been playing with it a while, when you used to go in here and add a page and say add a blank page, you used to see a little circle with a plus sign down here at the bottom. That has moved up top right here. So now you go up here and you click on, whatever widget that you want to do. Say we want to make a watch list. Click on that. Click whatever you want. Go through the same process that you used to before, but it is located in the upper right-hand corner now. But speaking of watch lists, the watch list definitely got a big upgrade this week.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So one of my favorite maps is the tree map, and it's a heat map, kind of organizing. I know we have a lot of viewers or watchers on here that haven't been on some of these webinars in the past, so I'm going to kind of start from the beginning on what we're looking at right now. This is the outbound tender market share data, and it's organized in a tree map, which is effectively something that you look at the top left corner, and that's going to be the thing with your largest value overall, and the things in the bottom right corner are going to be the things with the smallest value. So the data itself is market share of the overall country, outbound market share at that. So the Ontario market, sitting over there in the Imperial Valley of Southern California, has the largest total market share value. So think about this like you have a pie. The pie never gets larger or smaller, but you have individual markets taking up bigger or smaller slices of that pie. Well, Ontario, California basically represents 4.68% of the total market outbound volume in the entire country right now. And that's what this number is down here. For those of you that are used to seeing this map, we've added, obviously some data to the top of this. It used to just look like red and green squares. Now you can clearly see what each market's value is in absolute, and also the day over day change, which is this value right here, and the 1.9% in the big, large numbering.
And then what are the colors that are being displayed as well?
Right. So good good point. So the green color means that day over day, that value increased. The grayish value is kind of a flat or nominal increase, decrease. And then the red are the things with the bigger decreases, day over day, if you will. So that's a pretty good UI kind of visual tool that we've upgraded. So the next thing that we've added this week goes to the chart. This is one of my favorite additions, Brad.
I can tell you're excited. I can hear it in your voice. I can certainly see it in the smile, but
being the financial background that I have, I love this right here. So I'm going to pull up the DAT VNU. For those of you that know, that is the national average spot rate in the United States over the last several years. So what we've done here is we've made an index, or we didn't make it, DAT made this index based on a lot of their, all their subscribers and whatnot. Their rates get compiled, and then they get stripped down of all the accessorials and fuel, team transits, anything at all that is kind of independently volatile. And kind of said, we want to have the rate that is as clean as possible. It's literally representing like a line haul charge or just a base freight rate per mile, that is. So it's not anything, that you can, and this is strictly for the purpose of freight futures and kind of market analysis, like evaluation over a period of time. Now we're going to click on 1 year. And to get to this new feature, you click on display, and you'll see that we have a new box, and it's called seasonality. And you can change this period right here from anywhere to 2 to 4 to 5 years, depending on how much data is available for that specific indice, and click on show seasonality. For those of you that have seen this, probably some analysts are familiar with this charting style, but this is a seasonality chart, and its main value is to see year over year variation. You want to be able to see, as we all know, anybody that's been in the freight market has had a lot of experience with seasonality and what happens in April and June, and we all have these preconceived notions of what we expect to happen. Well, each year does have its own identity, and you can see down here that 2016, 15 through roughly 17 has a very similar pattern, but the last 2 years have been very discrepant. What the seasonality chart does is it takes each trailing 12 months and puts it on top of each other. So it's not taking necessarily one calendar year. Keep that in mind. It starts at the period, like right now, it's pulling the last 12 months spanning 2018, 2019 on this red line. And then the green line represents up here this 2017, 2018. And then the purple and orange are down here with 15 through 17. The value that you see listed right here is the most recent value on the chart. For those of you that aren't familiar with this index, there is a lagging on its reporting, and that is due to the fact that it does require multiple days to make sure that the value will not change. It does come from DAT, and you can get the most recent information on DAT's site with their rate view product, but for this specific index, we have to give this one an extra 4 to 8 days to make sure that all those rates are final and they're not changing. Sure. And that is because freight futures cannot have something that changes after you settle on it. So that's why you see this kind of gap right here. But that's also the most recent value. And you can see clearly that year over year, we're now kind of splitting off from where we've been. These rates kind of lined up here for a while, and now we're kind of moving into a cooler market.
And this is available for any data set that we have that has history.
Absolutely.
So I know from speaking with some of our customers, some fuel data is something that they found of interest to view and to look at. Some of our different fuel data sets. Zach, are you going to pull it up for me?
I'm going to do it.
Look at you.
I'm going to pull it up on the DOE, which for those of you that are familiar, is the average retail price reported by the Department of Energy. And this is what a lot of fuel surcharges are based on. And they're going to pull up the seasonality chart just to kind of give you a quick look at what fuel rates have done. Now that is a spaghetti mess. Fuel is obviously very unpredictable. this is obviously very dependent on gas prices and all sorts of stuff in the oil markets that we have very little visibility over. But if you have sonar, you can obviously see multiple energy like derivatives and values that you can look at to kind of measure and see what's going on in the oil and fuel markets. Obviously a big factor in transportation. Roughly 5 to 6% of the overall revenue is in the fuel cost.
Look at that.
Don't know if you know that.
That was quite a tidbit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
little Easter egg. So yeah, that one, the seasonality chart, hugely useful for managing year-over-year data. Now, we did add a new data set this week. The Logistics Managers Index is essentially, for those of you that are familiar with any macroeconomic analysis, some of you may have heard, and for those of you that use Sonar and follow our webinars, you will know that we have the ISM, which is the Industrial Supplier Managers Index, which will basically tell you what kind of manufacturing, that kind of value is going on in the overall economy. As that value gets higher, things are supposed to be getting better. They're expanding. As they get lower, they're kind of contracting. The Logistics Managers Index has a similar measurement, but it's very highly focused on the transportation and warehousing sector of the economy. What that means is, instead of having, the kind of GDP measures all of the economy, think about ISM, they kind of focus heavily on manufacturing. Logistics Managers really focuses in and hones in on the warehousing and transportation, like evaluation. And so any value above 50 is kind of considered to be growth or expansive. Anything below 50 is considered to be kind of contracting or declining in overall value. I've pulled up the inventory cost as an example because simply that's the first one on the list. But we have several of them available.
And is this a monthly?
This is a monthly report, just like most economic data. And it comes from survey data. And it's compiled by several university professors across the country. And they basically go out and ask people, a series of questions. And if the answer is largely affirmative, it'll be above 50. And if it's, largely negative, it'll be below 50. So right now, I pulled up the Logistic Managers Index composite measure. This is basically a combination of warehousing and transportation. So you can see this is starting to decline right after September. So this is a pretty cool measure in the way that I think most people didn't really know the market was kind of cooling off in October. They kind of got that, that heads up after the fact. Not that this is a leading measure or anything like that. This is one of those that's going to give you kind of validation or points of, kind of talking points to kind of validate some of your own information. So if you're a carrier or a broker and you had a very strong October in relation to September, for instance, and you look at the LMI total, and you could say, wow, we actually outperformed the market. You match up your own data to this, and you can kind of see, generally it's going to be revenue, but you're going to be able to see just how well or poorly you did. Obviously, profit margin is the best thing for a broker, but you're going to see how well you did in comparison to the market. And you can do that even if you are exposed largely to the warehousing sector. So the Logistics Managers Index breaks it down into basically transportation and warehousing into two pieces. And any of these that you see here with the T, you'll see is largely focused on transportation. So transportation capacity, which I know is a big hot button item, TPCP, just like that name, is going to show you kind of how the capacity in the situation. Now, I wanted to highlight this because it's kind of counterintuitive to what you think. Most of us that have been involved in freight think of capacity, as this kind of, tightening capacity or loosening capacity. As capacity increases in the marketplace, this value gets higher. So capacity actually means lower rates in general. So I kind of wanted to point that out. Just because if this value is getting higher, capacity in the market is getting higher. It's loosening, which tends to put downward pressure on rates. And again, kind of like what we saw with the overall index, you can see this right here. It's clearly showing that capacity is getting expansive, and we should see more downward pressure on the rates. So the converse of that, we also have the utilization index, which kind of moves in converse. So think about utilization, kind of the inverse of capacity. They should kind of fit together like a puzzle piece. Utilization is going to be how well transportation is being utilized. That means carriers are out there they're filling up their truck. They're not letting them sit. They're not, they have freight on them. They're not running deadhead miles, that kind of thing like that. So as this goes up, this number actually, the capacity number down here should actually come down, which you kind of see that here. You kind of see this kind of arching effect with utilization and this coning effect.
And who is this important to, and why, Zach?
So this is important to just about anybody involved in logistics. I think this is one of the most unique things because transportation has really not had a good macroeconomic kind of measurement. It's a huge portion of the economy, but it's been very hard to kind of segment that out and kind of measure it independently. I mean, obviously there's things like the CAS, which measures freight volumes and movements like that, and pricing and things like that. But this is kind of like everything in one bucket of transportation. It's very focused on it, just the general industry itself. So if you're a broker, carrier, or a shipper that has a transportation department or a lot of transportation costs, which all of them do, I think everybody's probably interested in knowing more about the transportation or the logistics managers index, any one of these values here.
And we're bumping up pretty close on time, as we do want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, and also I want to show one more thing here on our watch list before we end here. Our new gauge function, I think, is pretty awesome.
You're right.
I know you wanted to forget because there wasn't Bollinger Bands or trend lines or anything attached, but the gauge, the new gauge display type on the watch list is pretty awesome. It essentially measures the 52-week high and low via essentially, kind of industry, kind of to line up with the industry, kind of like a fuel gauge. It shows you the current level of the data set. What would be a good one to look at?
My favorite one to do here. Let's pull up operating ratio.
Go add in even market share. You could do if you add all into the symbol search, and you can kind of view, or
that's probably a
good one. That's under market share is a pretty good one. Just giving you insight into the current level of that specific market, what their high has been over the past year, and what their low has been, and then what they're currently at.
Put on here and save. There you go.
Look at that. So what are we looking at here?
So I pulled up the operating ratio, and you can see the low 52-week, high low sitting right here. 89 is the low. 93.74 has been the high over the last 12 months, which I think is tremendous for most people in the industry. These are all, this is kind of our asset-based carrier information. So the TCA has given us some of their, the best practices group, if you will. These are people that are going to have very consistent accounting reporting processes. It's all going to be very streamlined and the same, which makes the data very comparable to each other. That's just one example. And then, of course, all the outbound tender volume indices. I think this one's pretty cool, actually, because you're going to be able to see kind of the high-low over the course of the year. Allentown, Pennsylvania is one of the biggest markets in the country. These are organized alphabetically. Obviously, you're going to be able to kind of organize this the best way that you know how. The green, just like with the watch list map, is going to indicate a day-over-day increase, whereas a red is going to indicate a day-over-day decrease. But yeah, this one is pretty cool. The gauges, I think a lot of people in the transportation industry love the gauges. There's a good way to kind of get a good point of reference, because I think some of the biggest challenges of looking at new data is going to have that kind of reference point. You're going to be able to see some of the data and absorb what it actually means quickly, because I don't know what 423.02 means on a tender volume index basis in Atlanta, whereas I can see here clearly it's got a huge range. and it's sitting right up here in the middle. And I think that's the best way to use one of these gauges is if you're using some data that you're not necessarily accustomed to, it's going to give you a point of reference of where it's at. So Augusta, Maine, operating at a very low level in relation to its overall, the last 12 months volume.
Awesome. And I think we're about up on our time here. We do have a couple questions on our road condition data, and essentially what are we using to display this data, more or less. It looks like there's a couple questions. I think that kind of covers both of the questions on that specific topic.
What are we using to display the data?
So in terms of the inputs that we're receiving.
So
Sorry,
basically,
where does
where does the data come from? So we have a data provider that literally is able to measure the temperature of the road. There's all this Internet of Things, IoT stuff, sitting out there across the country, and they're able to kind of measure. They have the ability to kind of measure the weather. I mean, think about all the weather information that we have available. The weather company and whatnot, they have sensors, weather stations all over the place. This data actually comes from something that's not necessarily its primary source is necessarily for weather, but it measures the environment completely, which is why we're able to get that road temperature. And they've been able to kind of input that into an algorithm, which is why you're able to get that forecast data.
Awesome. And do you mind pulling up, there was a question that just came in about the wind and showing exactly how that would be displayed.
So turning on location forecasts, making sure that's on. I'm going to clear that off for a minute. So you go into your location forecast. Obviously, it defaults right here to the freight data. Location forecast, and then you click on these buttons over here, and you go down and find wind speed, and you're going to get a forecast for the exact point that you clicked on in the map. It's going to give you that forecast for the next 48 hours. So you can see over here in the west or the Midwest, in the North Platte market, the wind speed is not really necessarily an issue.
Okay, and it looks like we have one a little bit more difficult for you. I'm going to try to stump you here.
Right.
For the outbound tender market share, what type of decisions can that number drive? How could you use that essentially? How would a carrier react to that number?
Oh, the market share value is great for carrier use, because I'm going to pull that up on the map to illustrate that pretty clearly. The market share value, basically, as you're going to have surges of volume throughout the year, and the market share is going to tell you exactly what markets are having the biggest growth relative to the rest of the market. So why that's important is the way that, maybe the rest of the market is on a decline like it is right now. Like volumes are about 4 or 5% lower than they were this time or around this time last year. And so what's important for a carrier is to know exactly where my markets are having relative increases in volume, because that's the places that I need to focus on to move my trucks, to keep my trucks rolling. So maybe you're accustomed to seeing a lot of market volume in Dallas, for instance, and then you go to your market share and you'll see, I'm actually going to pull up a chart for that just to illustrate it. And you're going to see that actually the Dallas market, and OTMS.DAL would be the Dallas market. And I'm just going to pull it up and just show this actually only represents about 2.39% of the total market right now. This market is very slow and soft, and maybe it's not necessarily unseasonal for it to be that way. It's kind of just a derivative of market volume, but it's going to give you kind of how big of a piece of pie. Like when the market's heating up, Dallas is a big part of that pie. There's a big factor there.
And if you look at, for example, if you pull up Atlanta, you can kind of you can gain some insight into seasonality for some of these larger markets.
Exactly.
And when they're operating at higher volumes or market share relative to the rest of the country.
Yeah, whenever, and I'm glad you said Atlanta, because whenever a market like Atlanta kind of spikes, it has a huge impact to the rest of the market. Capacity, national capacity is driven by, you know, a lot of the top 10 markets in the country where they have ebbs and flows. So whenever one of these markets does have increasing market share, it's also going to gain a lot more attention, and carriers need to focus on Atlanta. For instance, when their market share value goes up to 4.79 after being at 4.51 or averaging, you know, down here in the low fours, that means that there's going to need to be a lot more capacity in that market.
Definitely. And then we have one about our heat maps. Where are we getting the info for our heat map? We have I'm not sure exactly what that's referencing. We have a lot of different data that is available, from our tender-related data to our fuel-related data to our weather-related data. So if you maybe want to leave your email in the question section, we can maybe address that offline. And then we have one: are we able to filter OD pairs on the gauge watch list?
So the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not certainly we only have OD pairs available for certain indices, such as our Outbound Tender Rejection Index, which I'll kind of pull up on a chart real fast just to illustrate what I'm talking about. So the Outbound Tender Rejection Index is literally a measurement of how much when a shipper tenders its loads, a carrier has the option of accepting or declining it. When they decline more often than they accept, that tender rejection rate goes up. So say, you know, somebody tenders over 10 loads, the carrier rejects 3 of them, that is a 30% tender rejection rate. Just to give a little background on tender rejection. So that is one of the ones that we offer on this kind of OD pair granularity. I think most people that are accustomed to seeing rates in the market are pretty familiar with how these work, but you can see here, you know, this is going to give you, like, this is probably one of the only ones that you can look at in a gauge, the OD pair tender rejection index. I can't think of a few others. There's going to be the DAT.
There's the USDA data as well.
USDA,
the reefer.
Ag rate data, which is going to be kind of the agricultural rate. Let's see here, fat to Dow.
So, and this actually kind of feeds into one of our questions as well. Are you able to show specific market rates by OD pair? So as you mentioned, we do have the DAT lanes, the index for the van index for our freight futures products. So there's only 7 specific origin destination pairs. On a rate basis, we do have spot rates for air freight and container freight that are listed as OD pair, and then as Zach here is showing the USDA produce.
Yeah, we're waiting on produce season here in a few months. So we have that. We have the DAT, OTRI. We're working on getting the volume OD pair as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we have all of this data that you're seeing that is on the SONAR webinars, is available via API connection. You can download into a TMS system, into an exportable Excel file, Tableau.
And certainly anybody that has like a lot of questions about SONAR itself. I know we have some newer attendees this week. You can always go to FreightWaves.com and click on SONAR. We have a link on that page. So it'll get you to SONAR. If I can see my screen. I can't see my screen. There we go. Click on a SONAR link. There's one up here too that I can't see. And all of this will be explained in one of these buttons here. And if you have further questions, obviously, you can reach out to us.
Yep, if you jump back to the dashboard really quick, if you don't mind, we're starting to get an influx of kind of operational questions. So there is actually a help desk kind of quick Yep, under the question mark that you can fill out a quick question under contact us. And that's if, of course, you don't already have direct access to one of the Sonar team members. But looks like we are getting quite a few kind of operational questions coming in. So I'm probably for the best use of everyone's time that's still on the webinar, I'm going to kind of take those offline if that's okay. And I think we're a little bit past time here, so we'll go ahead and hang around here for a few more minutes if we get more specific questions to new features and data sets and questions along those lines. But otherwise, thank you everyone for joining us this week. We hope you love all the new upgrades for those Sonar users out there. Of course, reach out to us if you have questions on some of these new features, new data sets as well. And this webinar will be recorded and it will be available on our Sonar, our www.freightwaves.com/Sonar website under our resources center. Actually, all of the webinars are housed on that website, so you can certainly access them there. Again, Zach Strickland, our Sonar expert and market expert, and Brad Ganane. Thanks for joining us today. We'll hang around for a few more minutes, but otherwise, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week at 2 p.m. Eastern. All right, we're going to go ahead and sign off officially here. Thanks again for joining us. Any questions, Sonar users, of course, reach out to your contacts. As I mentioned, we have the contact us under the question mark in the top right-hand corner of your Sonar dashboard. You can also get to us on www.freightwaves.com/Sonar. We'll see you guys next week at 2 p.m. Thank you.